Now, I know VIE and delisting scares is essentially destroying Alibaba. Told you to take it easy. Why are you scaring everybody away? You better stop it, I tell you. Better know where and when to draw the line. Okay? Promise? My goodness. So, delisting and VIE scares are back in town again. How else can they crash the Chinese equity space, right? I don't know how many times this has been rinsed and repeated. Seems like investors will never get tired of this entire news cycle. So we are really just a bunch of sadists though. We can never get enough of this kind of headlines. And the media also knows that and they never stop giving. First, we construct an entire narrative about how the Chinese government fears all these big tech companies. And spoiler alert, I personally think that they're not. Today, we are back at the VIE and delisting once again. So I'm actually fine with all this news reporting though, but can we at least get some form of accountability when they blow things out of proportion, but just ignores all the consequences and move on without any forms of closure? I still am waiting for my closures. I mean, I don't expect people to take full responsibility of whatever nonsense that they have spread, even though they know nothing much about it. But I guess that is part and parcel of being in a free world, right? Speak without any regards and zero accountability needed. I love it. You know what I don't love? It's you not smashing the like button. So remember to do so and scroll down to smash it now. Anyway, Bloomberg was actually the first to jump on the bandwagon where they reported on 1st of December that China is attempting to close loopholes used by tech firms for foreign IPOs. So they claim that China is planning to ban companies from going public on foreign stock markets through the variable interest entity, closing a loophole long used by the country's tech industry to raise capital from overseas investors. So this entire VIE thing has been scaring and scarring many investors. Scaring them is an understatement. There is this constant fear dangling above the heads of all Chinese equities investors because nobody knows when will China pull the plug and essentially invalidate the entire VIE structure. And everyone assumes that Chinese investments are like the next Squid Game coin, where the malicious creators can do a rug pull whenever they want to. And the funny thing is, right after the report from Bloomberg, the China regulators immediately denies the media reports that China will ban VIEs from listing overseas. So what other evidence do you actually need to further prove this point? The Chinese regulators themselves have already made it clear. Do you need Chairman Xi or some high officials in the CCP to step out and say the same thing? So even after the clarification, Bloomberg decides to keep the article and just included a slight edit to the entire article and allow people to read what they want to hear or what they want to read. I know, we all have our own inherent biases. People against China will say that this is just the start of China's downfall. Regardless of what the regulators say, it is definitely in the pipelines, and they are clearly lying. So as you can clearly see, no matter what the Chinese regulators do, people will just retrieve the message that reinforces their own understanding and ideas. Funny things though, it's always the bears that make the most noise, probably because they have vested interests, such as a short position. Even without a position, people will just blame everything on the Chinese market and the Chinese regulators because they're essentially the best punching bag in today's stock market. Everything is China's fault. Anything that goes wrong, it's China's fault. It's funny how this entire VIE structure thing has already been in existence for the last 2 decades, and it's back in the limelight again. People are really running out of trash to throw at Chinese companies. They just want to see whatever sticks and whatever narrative that they can drive. Now, it's part of a year-long campaign to curb the breakneck growth of Chinese internet sectors and what Beijing essentially termed them as reckless expansion of private capital. So Bloomberg did sheepishly include a line stating that while a universal ban on the VIE structure isn't being contemplated, a halt on foreign listings and additional reviews for Hong Kong IPOs would mean the model will no longer be a viable way for many startups to tap into the capital's market. So I think people are also heavily discounting how the Chinese government realizes the importance of having access to capital markets, the best and most matured one as well. Essentially, they are using foreign capital to build their own country, to put it bluntly. For those of you who really think that they're just a bunch of monkeys who don't know how to weigh the consequences, I don't think they're that blind, even though I'll reserve my comments on whether they're monkeys or not. That said, they do have their own considerations at home as well. So, it has always been a balancing act. On top of that, a senior official at the securities regulator said last week that China fully supports companies that choose Hong Kong as a primary listing venue. China, however, doesn't think that delisting from the United States is a good thing for the companies, for global investors, or for the China-US relationship. That said, I would still have to put out a disclaimer that both the Chinese and US regulators have the necessary capabilities to go ahead with the delisting in the event of a fallout or if the negotiations don't fall through. So, the SEC has also halted pending IPOs by Chinese companies until full disclosures of political and regulatory risks are made, warning investors who may not be aware that they are actually buying shares of shell companies instead of direct stakes in businesses. Honestly, for investors who bother to read the filings and disclosures, there are minimally at least 20 to 50 odd pages that outlines the risks involved regarding the political and regulatory landscape. The US regulators are just trying to obfuscate and aggravate the entire issue by painting a picture that all Chinese companies are really heinous in nature with the intention to defraud all the interested foreign investors. Anyway, if you're a foreign investor plowing in so much money into Chinese equities and do not know that it's under a VIE structure, then I don't even know what kind of due diligence you have been engaging in. I would also like to argue that this stance from the US regulators are being rather disingenuous, but who am I to judge? Just a random guy on the internet. Also, I would just like to take the time to sit the Chinese regulators down as well. So I know their intentions with the VIE. From the start, it was always deemed as a fail-safe mechanism to prevent manipulation from foreign capital, or sometimes even hostile capital. I'm sure they have a very sound internal framework on companies that are touchable and untouchable, which one that controls sensitive or insensitive data, which ones are investable and uninvestable. I know you have given ample warning to Didi beforehand, but given your abilities, you should have just issued an outright temporary ban onto Didi from seeking a foreign IPO. And because of this example that you have made out of Didi, it's just going to be more content for talking heads to bash on China and the entire baskets of Chinese equities. Unless this is some part of a grander plan that I do not see coming, I think it's definitely a mistake for you to go easy on Didi and allow them to bypass your so-called recommendations. Ultimately, it seems clear that China has no intentions in screwing with the VIE structure, as mentioned by the regulators. So it has continued to serve its purpose, and there is no qualms in keeping it intact. That said, the delisting concerns has definitely escalated to an all-time high with the help of our dear Didi Chuxing. Funny enough, not too long ago, there was hints being floated around that China's security regulators actually signals willingness to work with US over all these so-called audit inspections, and they are willing to create conditions to cooperate over the issue that threatens to delist 1.3 trillion worth of shares in the US exchange with whatever conditions they mean. It will ultimately be a compromise from both sides of the aisle. That said, it does seem like the Chinese regulators would like to cooperate, so the ball is technically on the US side. For those of you who constantly emphasize that it's China that's trying to screw with investors, maybe put yourself in their shoes. If they really wanted to screw with you, do you think you still own anything today? It will probably be gone by now. With that, I'll see you in the next video, but more importantly, I'll see you on the moon. Goodbye!